I've started recording every Mythic Plus key this season, and in these episodes I'll go over the ups and downs of my journey towards getting that juicy sought after 0.1% title. Only 2 weeks left now to gain some score as Season 4 is fast approaching, and all of these keys you're seeing now is the last ever tyrannical week for Season 3, so I tried my best to get in as many keys as I possibly could. I spent an ungodly amount of time in Valdraka mostly, but I'm going to touch more on that later on in the episode. Speaking about keys though, we started the week with a 28 Darkheart Thicket. We absolutely smashed the first part of the dungeon really easily. We actually had no deaths, which is really surprising with the leaps in the first pull and bursting. You always end up losing someone there. And then we of course do the double bear skip before the first boss, Invis Pass. The priest ends up getting aggro from the bears. I think he tries to fade and sneak past. I'm not sure if that's possible. I don't play priest. If it is, let me know. I guess he maybe just messed it up. Because me, personally, I have to use invis pots like a common pleb. Moving further into the dungeon after the first boss, we end up having a few random deaths. Healer. He goes down to the swirlies, I believe. We then clear the rest after he comes back, and we use the DH Fear Tech and Shadow Meld just to skip past this pack. We then pull the pack after that one, and then we're going to chain it down to the Cyclops boys down the bottom. But the healer goes down again, most likely putting some healing on the tank as he's gathering them up. Thankfully though, we did have reincon because we actually full wiped. I put myself in a safe spot, rezzed everyone up because shamans are chads. See, any other class would have failed there, we would have bricked the key already. We then clear everything to Oakheart where the key ends up bricking ultimately. We lose to Paladin as he mistimes his freedom clearing the roots alongside the Shattered Earth cast, so a lot of damage ends up just bringing them down. Then we end up CRing him, and then we lose the healer to Shattered Earth again as he didn't press a defensive, and that's the key. After that we head into a 28 Rise, which is a pretty tight time key, and I've had a lot of close calls which went the other way unfortunately. This first platform here is super vital with how well you play it as a group. Because it is tyrannical, most of the time you end up double pulling the mini bosses, which is what we did, which is always super annoying being a melee player because you have the orb going out and the swirlies. It's just not a fun time, which our paladin gets to experience firsthand. He ends up getting one shot by the orb. Poor dude. But that was the only misplay for the entire platform. We then pull tier with the vanguards, which now that I've kind of gotten used to it, it feels great honestly having the extra funnel targets for myself and then the priest in this key as well. We blast through everything to battlefield after tier, where we end up losing the priest to the earthquake mob, which I've mentioned before, it's overtuned. Can you imagine if elemental spec had this damage on their earthquake? Jeez. On the boss fight itself, something really weird happened, and I'm still kind of clueless on what actually happened. So we're about 50% of the way through the fight, and then I end up getting a Blade Storm cast on me, so I start moving out. I move out, and then the boss just charges to me with Blade Storm on top of him. I'm like, what? How did that happen? So I checked the death log and it says it was Decimate, which is the tank crusher ability. Hello game? Why is that on me? What? First time I've seen this potential bug, or it might have been a player fault by the tank or possibly something else. I am unsure. If you know what happened, please do tell me because I am still stumped. Really did suck though, dying 10 seconds into Lust. Ay. Fast forwarding ahead, we did actually kill the boss. We then moved on to Morchi. Normally on this boss, when you get the clones, the familiar faces, you all stack together in the middle so you can easily CC them all at once. But as we did this, the priest stood a little bit too close to the middle pack, so his clone 1-2s him. Maybe he was being a greedy boy for a cast and it cost him, who knows. We had just under 8 minutes after finishing Morchi, so we got the last pack and the last boss. The timer is still pretty close, and as I mentioned earlier, this dungeon is super tight on the timer. Now our love story ends with Deos. The tank had mentioned just before we started the boss that we're all going to stack as a 4, so everyone other than the tank on the wall, just so that we can make the best out of the sand pools because space becomes pretty tight later on as the boss goes on. On this boss as well, you really need to Giga Blast the ads which spawn as they hurt a lot, especially with the Dispel as it ticks super hard. We do all that really well, we get to phase 2 with no deaths. We're looking pretty decent on the timer still, as we've got Lust and 2 minutes 30 left to get the boss down. Our druid decided to stack on the tank, and he ends up going down on the first AoE. Tank wasn't best pleased because we had already pre-discussed where we were going to stand, and to be honest, yeah, I kind of get it why he was annoyed. The boss then casts a frontal, and the druid is still stacked on the tank, and he ends up getting killed by it. Obviously, they weren't happy with it. Druid wasn't happy with the tank. Tank wasn't happy with the druid. We then see the druid, and he goes down again alongside the priest to the swirlies, and that's the key ogre. We run it back again with a rise on 27, as we still only had a 26 done. This one goes well, and it's a fairly similar run in comparison to the 28. Our comp this time isn't the greatest, but sometimes it's about what you do rather than what you are. Worst quote of 2024 so far, but we move on. We blasted the rest of the platform with 0 deaths and tier. We got our first death on the pack up the stairs after tier from the healer, just too much damage going out. We cleared the area past the gauntlet where we definitely didn't hit stuff, and we had a couple of deaths there just to aggro and such from the smallies. We powerhouse through the rest of the dungeon like a hot knife through butter. Morchi dead, Battlefield dead, and then moving on to the last pack and Deos with over 11 minutes left, so we're absolutely steamrolling this key. We're already 3 minutes ahead of the previous run, and I know it is downscaled to a 27 from 28, but we just had more overall damage and we just played better. So, moving on to Deos. The healer wasn't too confident, and as you can see, we are 5 melee, so he wasn't feeling too great about doing the orb, so I kind of just volunteered, which I've actually not done before as a melee, but someone had to, and I'd rather it would deplete on my hands than let someone else do it and have it deplete that way. Speaking of the rest of the fight though, we only had 1 death where the 2 timekeepers come out. The warrior was on his lonesome, hitting the one on the right hand side, so he ends up getting a debuff on him, and he has the aggro from the right hand side mob, so he just ends up getting pelted down. Throughout the fight, I was losing DPS as well because I had to set out an orb sometimes, so I'm just kind of sat twiddling my thumbs waiting for the orb to drop. But we actually did it, and you're witnessing pure team player gameplay right here, and this definitely makes up for the times I send chain lightning over prior damage. Anyways, moving on, we killed the boss, and I didn't actually mess up the orbs, and for our efforts, we were top damage, and we gained +4 points, which takes us to 3587. Pog. Back to Darkheart Thicket again on the 28 with our own key, and you're going to see it's a pretty short key. We did the monster ball at the start, and we didn't actually lose anyone, so it went really smooth. We then fast forward a little bit late into the dungeon just before the double bears where we shroud pass, thankfully to the rogue. But after that, this is where the key falls apart. We end up losing the paladin on the first boss from the frontal, so he gets absolutely yeeted halfway across the room from Primal Rampage. As he's our CR class, we have to wait until one of us can CR him with the braces, but I think his body is in the poop, so because it doesn't despawn, from what I believe, he can't actually take it. But for some reason, he does anyway. I think he tried to take it and press bubble, which doesn't work out, and then that's our 1 CR. So the heal ends up going down a little bit later, and we have no more CRs, so we end up wiping, and that is the key. Now for one of our recent showrunners in this series is a tyrannical Atal'Dazar. If you've watched any of the previous episodes, then you know how this dungeon normally goes, but we may have broken the curse with this one, ladies and gentlemen. We go left side with Lust, and we have a couple of deaths there as the Bob Salami Mantle cast goes through. It was the fault of most of us as we did have a kick available. Normally in Atal, I tend to put my focus target on the Confessor so I can kick the mantle if it ends up being too close to getting cast. For some reason, I didn't do that this time, so I ended up just kicking nothing. So yeah, I was a pleb, I did nothing. We could have avoided it. We move on. After that, we dealt with all of the left side. We killed Priestess. We then head to Razan with Lust. And let me tell you, this boy has some health and tyrannical. We also pulled 2 of the Sky Screamers as you run down from the stairs. Just so it's basically free count really. We've got myself and the priest for funnel, and it saves us doing it after the boss. After Razan, we did a massive pull, and I was absolutely cranking DPS in this pack. We actually peaked over 800k without PI, I may add, which is pretty ludicrous. We then chain these Sky Screamers into the spicy pack here, where we do end up racking up a few deaths. I end up getting a double cast on me, and I end up going down alongside the Druid. I end up reincarnating, and then I get another double set of casts on me, so another death. It is a really rough pack in general. You want a lot of CC for this pack, because you have the shields which need to be stunned, and then you have back-to-back casts from the witches all the time. Yeah, it's just really rough. After that though, we skip past the pack in front of Vocal, and then we have a little priest friend here go down twice. I think on the first one, he ends up lagging as the poison pool comes out, so I think he takes 2 ticks, even though it looks like he moved out of the first tick. And then he ends up going down again after we rezzed him, because I think he panics and he's surrounded by poop, so he tries to move out the poop into more poop and dies. So we just left him dead. We then finish Vocal, and then we head to Big Mama Yasma, where we had over 8 minutes left, so plenty of time for the dungeon. And then this memey funny thing happened. I said good luck because, you know, Yasma and all that. We go up the stairs and the priest channels his inner Steve Irwin and kisses the spider goodnight. Gotta love the meme deaths. Onto Yasma though, it was a fairly clean fight, and I actually for once made a mistake on this boss where I was killing the souls. I was a little bit trapped, so I was like, oh, I'll just finish the souls off, and then a spider spawned underneath my feet, and I didn't see it, so I ended up clipping that. I have no idea how I didn't get one shot, still amazes me to this day. I then get racking pain because the boss wants to finish me off, and I die. I definitely could have lived the racking pain if I didn't take the damage to begin with. I get a CR, and then the druid ends up getting a racking pain alongside his soul still being up, so he ends up going down. But we do manage to finish the boss off, and we topped damned again on overall. We only had 3 PIs throughout the entire dungeon, as the druid had the other 8. We gained a little +3, and that takes us to 3590, so only 10 away from 3600. Asked the same group again if they wanted to do more keys. We ended up replacing the tank and the healer because they had to go. So we got them, we then went into a 28 fall, where your boy forgot to record the first 4 minutes, but we smoked the first big pull while I was doing millions and millions of DPS, and you just have to take my word for it. No questions please. We only had 1 death, clearing everything as well from the start all the way up until we spawned Timeways. And on Timeways, we end up losing the druid to the orbs. A little later into the fight, the monk dispels and makes a slow zone under his feet as he mistimed the pizza slice. We've all done it. I save a 10 stack surge just to hop through quick, and I survive thankfully. We then finish the fight, and look at how much damage your boy was pumping. Now after we clear all these dragons, this is where it all starts to go wrong with Blight, and I've had many dungeons this week go wrong on Blight. It's a pretty hard boss. But it's something about the timings of the corrosion debuff with the tank, or people not using defensives when they are getting it. I bricked a lot of keys. I get the corrosion debuff, I hold it as long as I possibly can, and I am a shaman, and it's the dragon phase and phase 2, so we have the corrosion on me, and we've got the AoE from the necrotic winds. So I hold it, as I said, as long as I can, pass it back to the tank, and you're going to see on the timer, it's just barely not enough time for him to get pulled in. So he ends up getting MC'd at like 0.2 seconds. So I end up getting the frontal and die. So yeah, we end up wiping from that. The tank isn't best pleased, and you know, as I've said before, Shaman isn't the greatest person to swap the debuff back and forth. Probably better on the healer. He rages out a little bit and he's like, good luck on the 27, blah blah blah. But he ends up staying because we have plenty of time. He's just having a little hissy fit. Now, on to the next attempt. I completely messed up, and I'm going to hold my hands up into heaven, as I was a little bit scared the tank was going to get MC'd again, so I ended up double taking the corrosion debuff, which was fine because I had Astral Shift running, but I wasn't paying attention to the timer, so I ended up getting the second corrosion debuff as the frontal was coming off, and I die. 100% my bad, can't say anything on that, but I didn't really lose too much because we only lost 5 seconds on the death because I had reincarn. But yeah, we did recover. It then goes even worse where we have another necrotic winds going out and the tank has the corrosion debuff. I've already run out of defensives as you can see, so I'm leaving it between the monk and the tank to swap around for now. The monk is trying to heal everyone else because necrotic winds hits like a truck, He has got a shield on him, so the tank could have put it on top of the monk and he probably would have been alright. But instead, he just decides to let himself get MC'd. The boss was on 50% HP, so that's normally when he phases, but for some reason he didn't. So he didn't give us that time for the MC to run out, and then, we still get 5 people going into the last phase, because he decided on the way after losing aggro from the tank, he's going to run over to the druid and slap him, and then he dies. So as soon as he does that, he then phases, typical. We're then doing the last phase with 4 people. A little bit into the phase, we end up losing the healer because he runs straight into the tank with the corrosion debuff and he didn't have a defensive. And that's the key, and I'm going to leave the footage there because I'm going to exclude what everyone else started typing afterwards. Now we have one more attempt at a rise for the week on the 28, and you'd think I'd know this dungeon like the back of my hand with how many times I've actually attempted it this week. But myself and the others get absolutely rolled by the orb from the maiden alongside a corroding volley going off because I can't kick it because I'm stunned. So all 3 DPS end up going down. Thankfully though, that was the only clowning for the starting area here, so we did actually clear everything else lovely jubbly alongside Tyr. And then we head upstairs to the 2 mobs before the gauntlet. I see the tank ahead, he throws his glaive. I send 3 globals, I send my primordial wave on wolves, and then I press elemental blast. And as I press elemental blast, I get meleeed. Not like this, man. I run back, and then we also end up losing the healer on one of the AoEs. We managed to recover and finish the mobs. And I have a question, am I jumping the gun too early here? It has actually happened a few times. I feel like the tank should have aggro, because I'm not really sending like crazy amounts of damage. Most of the time I'm just setting up and I end up getting meleeed. So yeah, I've had way too many dirt naps here. Just like the other rise attempts this week, we are pretty pressed for the time as we're finishing the last pack before Deos with just over 5 minutes left, so by the time we get through the RP, we've got around 4:30 to get the boss down, which is definitely doable. But as we kill the second ad, and we're just about to get him to the double ad spawn, we end up losing the paladin because he gets the dispel on him. Doesn't get the spell quick enough alongside the orb AoE, so he ends up going down. The healer was slightly too slow to dispel him there. We then get him rezzed, we clear the 2 ads, we stack nicely together just to drop the initial poop as the boss is coming into the last phase. We've got about 2 minutes left on the timer, so again, probably still could have timed it, but never goes that simple. All hell breaks loose on the next Infinite Corruption as we end up losing the paladin and the healer, and that marks the end of the key. Diving under the sea, we try our hand at a 28 throne, and this key is really sketchy for us being shaman. Even with the Fract Trinket, most of the bosses here can still one-shot us in our verse set, so pretty Monka-esque dungeon for enhancement. But speaking of the key though, we actually go massive at the start, pulling the entire corridor, and I may add, we had 0 deaths doing so, pretty good. We of course funnel down the sentinels, we then get past that, we smash the Ravager, we head upstairs to the next corridor where we completely blast that pack as well. We almost kept up with the DH, almost. We clear a couple more packs, and then this is where the key goes to crap. So we end up pulling the second Ravager upstairs here with the triple caster pack, and I get aggro and meleeed alongside the other DPS. What I think ended up happening was the tank probably accidentally pressed Shadow Meld, as the ret didn't cast Bop on him, and I looked over the footage a few times. I don't really know what else it could have been other than, like what I said, Shadow Meld. Or maybe it's a bug, but I've not actually seen this bug happen before. The tank was completely adamant that he didn't press meld, but yeah, you be the judge. We go again after wiping up, and then we end up getting our healer dead because he gets clipped from the acid pool. Big swirly on the ground. First time I've seen someone die to that in a while. We do manage to finish the rest of that pull even after losing the healer. We then do a double pull here to make up the time, which is a pretty sketchy pull. Even just the pack of 5 is a pretty nasty one, so yeah, it doesn't end up working out. We end up losing the DH to Cass, and then because he goes down, we then can't kick more or CC more Cass, so I end up going down, and then everyone else ends up wiping, and then we just decide to call the key because we've had multiple deaths just to random stuff, and we're not going to make the timer. Another series favourite here is Fall, which we attempt again on a 28, and we're playing with our good old friend Ducilla, the bear tank. Saw him queuing up this key in LFG. And I think because we share our off-meta bond, most of the time when I am signing up to his keys, we do get an invite, so kudos to him. And we actually cranked in this opening pull here. We were doing over 1 million DPS and then we were sustaining 900k, which is pretty good. We're just going to forget that our damage is being buffed, and let's just say we're all natural, baby, like the hunks in the gym. We do have one death though on the first boss as the shaman gets clipped by the dust from the projectiles after the slam. Definitely not had that happen to us in one of these episodes. Moving on though, we did get the training dummy boss down and then timeways as well. We move through the portal where you all run together and you go and skip the dragon, but our tank had other ideas and the only button he knew how to press after coming out of the portal was W. So he blasts on ahead, he triggers the dragon, but thankfully we had a clutch play from our rogue here who distracts the dragon in mid-air so we can sneak past anyways. I actually did this trick myself on my own rogue after learning this, so if the tank didn't do this I probably never would have figured this out, and then when I did my own dungeon on the rogue we would have pulled the dragon, so maybe it was meant to be. Unfortunately our end of the run comes at Blight again. This is getting a bit of a pain in the ass, this boss, honestly. We end up losing the healer here because he stood in the frontal where the tank was trying to clear his corrosion debuff. They're kind of just going left and right, so he ends up dying. He ends up getting a CR, and then we get a necrotic winds where he ends up going down again. Not even to the AoE, he actually gets clipped by the swirlies coming out, which is pretty troll. I then end up doing a clutch swap with the tank who has the corrosion debuff because he's going to get MC'd. Luckily I did still have astral shift up, so I quickly shifted over. Like that little wordplay there. And then yeah, I end up barely missing out on the front wall as well, so very clutch by me. Even after the clutch play though, it does go to crap in the last phase as we end up losing the healer straight away to the corrosion debuff. Just didn't top himself in time. The augmentation evoker then gets the corrosion debuff and then he dashes through, which passes it to the rogue, and he dashes at the same time. The breath was baited in that direction, so he gets breathed on and dies. After that, the healer gets breathed on as well because he was rooted in place, and that's how the key goes down in flames. Now you're going to see the shortest Darkheart Thicket key you'll ever see on this series. We go big at the start as it's tyrannical of course, and myself and the paladin end up dying instantly because we rip aggro somehow. So we end up dying in the lust window, which is giga cursed. I end up reincarnating and then we tried to finish up the pull. We end up getting more and more deaths. I think we end up getting 9 deaths. And then the healer just dips the F out of the dungeon, which I completely do not blame him for. And that's the key. I'm showing this key here as we actually did gain +1 on it, even though it's a key we had already timed at 28 Blackrook. Slightly off topic, as I did mention at the start, I did a lot of reroll keys and I did keys I'd already timed to potentially play with the same group again just because it was really annoying trying to get in groups. A lot of the time I just didn't end up going into groups because I just never got invited. So this is going to segue into the topic I'll bring up now. I think I spent the most time this week actually trying to get into keys than I did in any other week I have done since this series had started. Title range is now unfortunately out of the picture because we're not going to have a big enough tyrannical score alongside the fortified, so my goal is now just hit 3600 before the season ends, which I'll be really happy with if we do achieve it. We are really close, so I am hoping that we do achieve 3600. It'd be a shame if we didn't. So potentially there might not be another episode next week, as season 4 is next week as well, and I'm going to be pumping out videos throughout the season. So most likely I'm probably going to take a break next week, and there probably won't be an upload as I've said, as I will be smashing keys as soon as season 4 comes out, be getting that footage, and then I'll be getting out those videos you'll all want to see when season 4 does come around. Right, we have another 28 full. I do apologise, and it's the same story as all the other ones, so I'm going to keep it short. We cleared the timeways, no issues. In the timeways fight itself, we had the healer dispel me early twice just before I got into the fast zone, so I ended up going down twice from that. We then also had the priest going down twice just to the AoE from the dispels. Thankfully, the later deaths came right at the end of the fight, so we did actually finish the fight. Then, of course, it's onto Blight, where we deplete again. It's the bloody gatekeeper of my fall gains on Tyrannical. We get even further this time than the other ones. We get to the last phase where the paladin dies to the corrosion debuff in an awkward spot on top of the poop on the floor. So the healer tries to res him with his CR braces, and it expands underneath his feet as he's doing so. so he ends up dying to the slime, and that's a wipe. We go again as we had really good time. We get to the last phase again. Paladin dies to the slime stuff on the ground, which was probably overlapped with entangling, but it's still really troll. The tank's MC is about to come, so he tries to pass it to the monk, who didn't press the defensive as he goes down, and that's the key. Lots of depletes this week as we head into another short Darkheart Thicket 28 here, where we actually make a really good start here. We only lose one person in the first pull, and then it goes completely disastrous. We go into this area here, we have the rogue go down to the Starfall swirly, and then we end up losing the tank. Cast end up going off, so he ends up just taking too much damage and goes down. Most of us die other than the priest, who decides to kite all the way back to us for some reason, and then we end up just racking up death after death because there's so much stuff going on in this pack anyway that I don't know why he just didn't decide to reset even though we called it. And then after a few more deaths, he then just decides to leave the group. I have actually noticed this Kefin dude before. I've played with him a few times, and he does tend to have a short trigger on leaving the group. Now, I just want to say, yes, this is another 4 key, but it's a W, so I'll keep it as short as possible because you've seen way too many 4 keys this episode, so just bear with me, okay? Also, mega shout out to Gamer Girl, the Paladin here. I was sat in LFG for ages, and I finally got an invite, and they said, oh, I'm a viewer of the series, which is great. It was a really wholesome experience. I had a nice little conversation, and I can't actually believe I got an invite through the series. It's quite a surreal feeling having that happen, but it definitely beats being in Valdrakken groupless for hours on end. They also invited their feral friends, so double off meta comp, and I'm all for it. The start was pretty shaky, and I ended up getting caught in a ripper circle, so I ended up going down right at the end of the first pull, and then on the boss the paladin dies to dropping a sample on top of one another, so it's just too much damage. And then we have another death from the healer because he gets clipped from the projectiles on the first boss. But we push forward. We have a few deaths from the area in timeways, as it can be pretty spicy and the healer was struggling a little bit. We did manage to get timeways down with no hiccups though. We then get to Blight again, and we have a few bumpy parts of course because it's Blight. I realised that the tank was also the really whingy one from an earlier run in this episode. You may recognise him, and he does show his true colours again later in the fight. Now it is again shenanigans in the last phase of this boss where we rack up quite a few deaths. The druid goes down to the corrosion, so death 1. Death 2, the tank has the MC running again and he backpedals into the druid, who dies, obviously because he had nothing running to take it, and he gives it in last second. I then have to take the debuff from the tank with Astral just before he gets MC'd. We res the druid back up. The tank again is about to get MC'd and he passes it to the druid, who dies for the 3rd time, so thankfully we did have quite a lot of CLs here. You would think he'd maybe try put it on someone else, or maybe try call someone else to take it. He then starts calling the ret a degenerate and he dies because he's not even playing the game, he's busy typing away instead of playing. And yeah, I mean the ret probably could have took a few of the debuffs as they are tankier than me and the druid, but do you really need to act this way? We do end up killing the boss, thank bloody god, so many wipes on this stupid ass boss. We then have a really clean Iridocron, and we gain plus 3 points, so getting ever so close to that 3.6k now, and we just barely missed out being on the ret. That is the end of the episode, and if you did skip here, shame on you, but I advise you to watch slightly earlier on, as I did mention about possibly not having an episode next week. Speaking of the journey though, thus far, it's been a wild ride, and I really appreciate all the support you guys have given this series. It's actually mad how many of you like this series, and reading the comments when I wake up in the morning is great, puts a nice little smile on my face every day. And it's also great that I help show you what not to do when I'm doing silly things. So win-win there. I wish you all the best in your milestones this season, and if you've already achieved them, good job. Quick note for Season 4, I will be doing my normal tips and tricks videos as I did in the previous 2 seasons, and I'm going to be doing many other videos as well throughout the season. Hope you all enjoyed this whole season, Season 3, and let's smash Season 4. Take it easy everyone, see you next time.